Thank you. It is, I gotta say, it's great to be back in Toledo, but it is cold. I got a little tour of the facility just before I came on stage, actually while Kelly was speaking, and thank you, Kelly Loeffler, our great SBA administrator. She's doing a great job, we're proud of her, but I think I'm still shivering from the tour I got outside. You guys are a hell of a lot tougher than I am to be able to manage this cold every single day, and I can't wait for the mainstream media stories today that the Vice President is suffering from unnamed tremors. And what I'm suffering from is Toledo in January. It is cold up here. I will say that when I was flying in here, sometimes when you're vice president, you travel over the country, you travel over the world, and you're not always sure exactly where you're going. I was very excited to be back in Toledo today, but for a brief second, I forgot where I was coming. I opened the window, and I thought the president had sent me to Greenland. And which is going well, by the way, which is going well. But let me give a few shout-outs here. Besides Kelly Loeffler, I want to thank a few people who are here. In the front row here, we have our great United States Senator for the state of Ohio, John Husted, my replacement. And he's doing a great job. He's helped us a great deal. We have the next governor of the state of Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, give it up for Vivek. I believe we have Vivek's new running mate, Rob McCauley. Rob, where are you there? Hey, Rob, good to see you, man. Thank you for being here. And I see our great Secretary of State, Frank LaRose. Thank you, Frank. Now, Rob, I'll give you advice as a number two. Here's my advice. What you need to do when you're governor, or when you're lieutenant governor and Vivek is governor, because you guys are going to win, and John Husted is going to win in November. We got to make sure that happens, right? You guys are going to get out there and make sure these guys win. We're going to be with you every step of the way, but when Rob is lieutenant governor, the secret to being a successful number two is to take credit for every single good thing the administration does. And when anybody criticizes the administration, you can step back and say, that was not me, that was number one. That is how you be a successful lieutenant governor for the state of Ohio. That's my approach as Vice President of the United States, and I see my dear friend Jay Edwards, who's running for treasurer. Jay, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for everything that you've done for our state and our country. Now, I'm headed from here to Minneapolis, where we're going to talk with some of our ICE agents, talk with local officials about how we can turn down the chaos. And my simple piece of advice to them is going to be, look, if you want to turn down the chaos in Minneapolis, stop fighting immigration enforcement and accept that we have to have a border in this country. It's not that hard. If you look all across our country, what's happened in Minneapolis is happening almost nowhere else in the United States of America. And that's because whether it's in Texas or Tennessee, it's in red states, it's in blue cities, even within our country, most people are cooperating with the simple principle that we ought to be able to enforce our immigration laws and get illegal criminals the hell out of the United States of America. It's really not that complicated. But in a few distinct cities, you see this craziness because the far left has decided that the United States of America shouldn't have a border anymore, and they are willing to fight and penalize and dox and even assault our law enforcement officers in order to fight for the basic principle that anybody ought to be able to come into the United States of America. Well, I'll tell you right now, the Trump administration, we reject that. We are going to get illegal criminals out of our country, and we're not going to let a few left-wing radicals stop us. But I'm here in Toledo to talk about the great American comeback, and that is what I believe. We are 1 year in. We are 1 year in to raising wages for workers instead of declining wages for workers. We're 1 year in to $18 trillion of new investment for the United States of America instead of investment going to every other country but the United States of America. We're 1 year in to getting illegal aliens out of our country so that American homes can go to American citizens, which is exactly where they ought to go. And we are 1 year in to seeing lower inflation and bigger paychecks and more opportunity for the American worker. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are on the cusp of the greatest economic year in the history of the United States of America because we're doing something new for a change. We're investing in you. We're investing in American workers. We're investing in American businesses, and we're saying to everybody that the United States is open for business, but only if you invest in our great American people and our great American businesses. We are done with the old approach of shipping American jobs overseas and investing in everybody else. We're back to investing in the American worker, and we're not going to stop fighting for you until we return America to the true golden age of great American prosperity. Now, even a year in, we've already seen incredible success from the Trump administration's economic policies. The IRS says that this is going to be the biggest tax refund year in the history of the United States of America. And I know there are a lot of far-left Democrats like Marcy Kaptur who don't like it when the government gives you back your hard-earned money, but the Trump administration believes that you earned it, you ought to keep it, and we ought to keep our hands the hell out of your pocket in Washington, D.C. So why are we going to have the biggest tax year, the biggest refund year in the history of the United States of America? It's because the president, working with the Republican Congress, got no taxes on tips. It's because we got no taxes on overtime. It's because we got no taxes on Social Security. 3 promises that we ran on, 3 promises the President of the United States kept, and because of it, every single person in this room and every single person in the state of Ohio is going to benefit from it. That's what we said we were going to do. We were going to end the green energy scam and invest in American energy workers, and we did it. We're going to reward companies for investing in the United States of America and penalize companies for trying to invest in communist China and places all over the world. We said we were going to do it, and we did it. And because of it, we're starting to see the benefits for American workers every single day. We have the lowest inflation that we've had, well, since the last Trump administration. We have rising wages for American workers. You know that under the Biden administration, those terrible, terrible times, under the Biden administration, you lost an average of $3,000 over that 4 years because inflation was out of control and wages were stagnant for our country. You know, under the first year of the Trump administration, you've already gained over $1,300 in real wage gains. And my friends, we are just getting started. Because what the President of the United States says every single day is we are not done fighting for the American worker until we get everything back that the Biden-Harris administration took away and more beyond that. I don't want you to just struggle to get by. I don't want you to worry about paying your credit card bill or your medical benefits. I don't want you to think, do I buy prescription drugs or do I buy food? That is the legacy of the Democratic Congress under the Biden-Harris administration, and it's something we can't go back to. A lot of you know my story. I mean, this is my home. You all, well, you voted for me, at least most of you did. So, actually, in this room, I probably got about 100% of the vote. I think I see a few people who weren't old enough to vote for me in 2022, but look, you know my story. You know the fact that I grew up in a family. I was raised by a grandmother who would look at her credit card statement every single day and wonder, what can we afford? Can I buy my medicine this month, or do I need to focus on food? Can we take a little bit extra maybe and buy those pills that she needed in order to stay healthy and keep our family afloat? These are the decisions that way too many families had to take under the Biden administration. And under the Trump administration, we want better for you. And we're fighting better for you every single day. We want you to have enough prosperity to, yes, buy the things that you need, to, yes, buy those medications and put food on the table, but maybe to take a little vacation. Because if you work hard every single day, you ought to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Maybe you want to buy something extra for your kids. Maybe you want to do something that you couldn't do when you were a kid, because that is the promise of the American dream, that we leave the next generation a little bit better off than the generation that came before. And what we had under the Biden-Harris administration is lower wages. We had higher prices. We had more people struggling to get by and more people who gave up on the essentials instead of buying the things that they needed to buy. What we have under the Trump administration is a totally different approach. And what we're trying to do, and what we've already done a lot over the last year, is made you wealthier, has made your communities safer, has gotten those illegal aliens out of the United States of America, and is trying to rebuild that all-important American dream. So I have a very simple question. Do we, 1 year into this great American recovery, do we want to go back to the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration? No, we don't. So let's keep doubling down on American prosperity. Let's keep doubling down on the American worker. And let's tell Marcy Kaptur and the rest of the crazy congressional Democrats that we are not going back. We are going forward to a brighter future for every single one of our citizens. You know, there are things the media doesn't talk about that I think are so important to highlight because they show real progress for the American people. Did you know that for 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration, Americans paid the highest prescription drug costs anywhere in the world? And we did it because we had an administration that refused to go to Big Pharma and say, this is ridiculous that you're charging 1/10 the price in England or in France that you are in the United States of America. So what did the president do? One of the first things President Trump did is he hauled these pharmaceutical executives into the Oval Office. He wasn't getting any help from Congress, though we certainly would have appreciated Marcy Kaptur helping us lower prescription drug costs, but we weren't getting that help. So what did he do? He brought the pharma executives into the Oval Office and he said, you are done forcing Americans to pay more for prescription drugs than any other country anywhere in the world. And so now, thanks to the president's leadership and thanks to the support of our congressional allies like John Husted, we have prescription drug costs coming down in this country for the very first time. Whether it's antibiotics or whether it's cancer drugs, whether it's the most advanced therapeutics that exist anywhere in the world, Americans are seeing lower costs. And they're going to keep on seeing lower costs because the President of the United States had the courage to fight for you rather than international pharmaceutical companies. Now, the media doesn't talk about that because, of course, it makes us look good, but these are the victories that depend on having smart, wise leadership in Washington, D.C. You know, another thing the media doesn't talk about is that under 4 years of the Biden administration, the average cost of a home in the United States of America nearly doubled. And in certain jurisdictions, it actually got way worse than that. There are certain places where the cost of a home in 4 years went up by 200%. What's happened over the last 5 months? Rents have gone down over the past 5 months. And so though there's still a lot of work left to do, we're finally seeing more Americans being interested, especially our young families, being interested in buying a home for the first time. We're seeing those rents come down. We're seeing the cost of housing flatten out a little bit. And one of the biggest reasons is because on the one hand, we lowered the regulatory burdens to build houses in this country, while on the other hand, we got illegal aliens out of the United States of America who are taking American homes. That is how you lower prices. Focus on American workers and invest in American home building. You don't give all of our homes to illegal aliens. That is the legacy of the Biden-Harris administration. But on all these things, we know there is still so much work to do. And this is something I want you to hear. The Democrats talk a lot about the affordability crisis in the United States of America. And yes, there is an affordability crisis, one created by Joe Biden's policies. You don't turn the Titanic around overnight. It takes time to fix what was broken. I said earlier that the average American has seen $1,300 of real increase in their wages just in the past year. Well, Joe Biden, they saw a $3,000 decrease. Now, on the one hand, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that you're $1,300 richer than you were just a year ago. But you know what really pisses me off? That compared to when Donald Trump left office after his first term, you're still about $2,000 poorer. Because that's what happened under the Biden administration. They did so much damage that it's going to take us time to rebuild the great American prosperity that we had at the end of the first Trump administration. But what I'm telling you is that we are committed to doing it. As much as the media focuses on distractions every single day, in the Oval Office, the president looks at us and says, why haven't we done more? Let's do more. Do more. He'll tell us, person by person, from the Secretary of Commerce to the Secretary of the Treasury to our SBA administrator to the Vice President of the United States. Fight every single day for better home prices for Americans, for lower prescription drug prices, and of course for rising wages. That is what we're going to do, that is what we have done, and that is what we promise will be the legacy of the second Trump administration. More prosperity for you. Now, I want to take a few questions from the media, but before I do, I just want to close with this thought. So, you know, growing up in Middletown, Ohio, which is pretty much due south on I-75, a lot of you probably spent time in Middletown in the same way that growing up I spent a fair amount of time in Toledo. The story of towns like Toledo, the story of towns like Middletown when I was growing up was one of decline. It was a story of factories closing down, of good people losing their jobs, of families that were fracturing under the financial stress that sometimes comes when people lose that access to a good job. That is not the future that we should expect for our children. We should demand better from our leaders, and that's exactly what the Trump administration is promising. Not a story where you open up the morning paper or you turn on the TV and you see a factory that's closed down, but you see a new factory that's being built. Not a story where your neighbor lost their job, but a story where your neighbor gets a new and better job because of what is being built right here in towns like Toledo. Not communities that are unsafe, where you get mugged or murdered walking down the street, but where every single person, rich or poor, black or white, can enjoy their God-given right to public safety in their own community because we're fighting for law enforcement as opposed to against law enforcement like the last administration. I want the grandmothers, like my grandmother, who are raising grandkids they weren't necessarily planning to raise. I want them to not have to choose between putting food on the table or buying their medicine. That is the future that we're fighting for. And that is what the Democrats in D.C. have fought against every single day of this administration. Now, I don't want to say all Democrats, because my mamaw, the woman who raised me, was one of those blue dog Democrats. She was socially conservative, she was patriotic, but she was a Democrat. And I know that in Toledo, there are a lot of those Democrats still today. But I got to tell you, in Washington, D.C., those Democrats do not exist. They disappeared from Washington, D.C. They care more in Washington about using this country as one big fraud scheme than they do about fighting for your prosperity. And that's why we cannot reward these people come November. What are they actually fighting for? Well, we know what they're fighting against. They hate Donald Trump obsessively, and they talk about it every single day. They want men to play in women's sports, which is crazy. But even aside from it's crazy, why the hell are you talking about that instead of figuring out how to fight for the American people? They want the Somali fraud ring in Minneapolis and frankly in other states too to continue. While a lot of Americans can't afford the cost of child care, they want to take the very programs that we use to make child care more affordable and give them to fraudsters who are illegally in our country to begin with. These are not politicians who care about you. They care about keeping the fraud going. And the question in November is very fundamental. It's going to be, do we reward the people like John Husted, who cut your taxes, who fights for lower housing costs, who fights for lower prescription drug costs? Or do we reward the crazy far-left Democrats who think that America is one big get-rich scheme for fraudsters? That's it. That's simply the question. So I'm asking you, are we going to fight for the people who are fighting for the American dream? Are we going to send a message to the far-left radicals that this country belongs to American citizens, not to illegal aliens? Are we going to fight for the American dream for people like my grandmother and people like your children every single day? So let's remember what we're fighting for this November. It's to have political leadership in this country that fights for the American people, that fights for the American dream. Don't forget it, my friends. Let's work hard. Let's elect these great candidates to higher office, because that's the only way we are going to send a message to the Democrats that this country belongs to Americans and that the American dream belongs to the citizens who built this nation. God bless you, and thank you for having me. Now, I appreciate that, but I'm going to take a few questions from the reporters, and then we're going to hit the road.
Mr. Vice President, John Kostick from News 5 in Cleveland. President Trump outlined the framework of a future deal on Greenland yesterday. NATO this morning, however, said the Secretary General did not propose any compromise on sovereignty. What's your understanding of what is in this plan, and would you stand for something that did not include ownership even beyond where the bases are located?
So, John, first of all, it's good to see you again. John is, this is going to ruin his reputation among his liberal media peers, but John is one of my favorite journalists in the state of Ohio. He's a great TV journalist from Cleveland. And I used to joke with John that if he ran for high office, maybe back in 2012, 2013, he would have won, because his name is almost exactly the same as John Kasich. And that if he ran in 2024, he would have got his ass kicked. So it's amazing how things change, John. But I see you're still doing great things on Greenland. First of all, we're here to talk about the great American comeback. And that's what the president is focused on. That's why the president went to Davos. You know why? Because he wants more investment from all over the world in the United States of America. You'll hear this number thrown out, $18 trillion of new investment. You know what that means? That means new factories. That means new plants. That means new oil refineries and new energy facilities in the United States of America. Because for so long, our government had the policy that we were going to invest in other countries. No. We want other countries to invest right here in the United States of America, and that's why the president went to Davos, to say that America is open for business, but America is open for business so long as you're building right here in Toledo and all across our great country. That is the message. Now, on Greenland. Simple fact is, Greenland matters to American national security because our entire missile defense relies on security in the Arctic. This is something the media who's obsessed with Greenland, they completely forget why Greenland matters. What if, God forbid, I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but what if a foreign country launched a missile at the United States of America? We would need control over the Arctic in order to shoot that missile down. Our entire missile defense system depends on that Arctic security. Meanwhile, the Chinese and the Russians and even the Danes who control Greenland admit that they want to control that facility. They want to control that island, that landmass. That would make us weaker. That would make our country more endangered. That would mean that if the president is negotiating with a foreign leader, he would have less leverage because they would be able to realistically threaten the sovereignty and the territorial safety of the United States of America. We're not going to let that happen. The negotiations with NATO are going fine. I believe, having seen this for the past year, that when the president sets his mind to accomplish something in negotiation, he accomplishes it. And fundamentally, NATO and the Danes and everybody else have to recognize the simple fact that this matters, not just to American security, but to world security. So we're going to keep on trying to make sure that we secure that landmass so that we can protect the American people, as we've done and will continue to do. Thank you. Whoever's next. The lights are very bright, so I can't see, but whoever's got the microphone, just shout out a question.
Mr. Vice President, Henry Gomez, NBC News. President Trump this week said that ICE has made some mistakes. I'm curious what steps the administration is taking to rectify those, and do you think your presence in Minneapolis today will calm the tensions there?
Well, certainly one of my goals is to calm the tensions, to talk to people, to try to understand what we can do better. When the president says that that mistakes have been made, my thought on that is that, well, of course there have been mistakes made, because you're always going to have mistakes made in law enforcement. I mean, we all know this. Probably every single person in this room knows a police officer. 99% of our police officers, probably more than that, are doing everything right. Some people are going to make mistakes. That's the nature of law enforcement. But the number one way where we could lower the mistakes that are happening, at least with our immigration enforcement, is to have local jurisdictions that are cooperating with us. There are some very basic things that would make Minneapolis look, Memphis, Tennessee, a blue city where you do not have this chaos in immigration enforcement because the local police and the local authorities are cooperating with us. So when you look at Memphis, Tennessee, or Austin, Texas, or any other community virtually across the United States of America, and you don't see the same level of chaos in Minneapolis, the natural conclusion is that it's not what ICE is doing in Minneapolis, it's what Minneapolis authorities are doing to prevent ICE from doing their jobs. And that's exactly what's happening. So let me give you just a couple of very real-world examples of some of the problems that we face. So let's say you have a sex offender. We've arrested a number of sex offender illegal aliens in Minneapolis just in the last couple of months. But that person, because they're an illegal alien, we don't know where they live. We don't know their address. If local authorities were cooperating with us, it would be easier to send an ICE agents to the person's house to arrest them, to have local law enforcement protecting our immigration officers. They throw the sex offender in the back of a car, deport that person, throw them in jail, whatever, and then they go home safely to their families. That's not what's happening. What's happening instead is that the Minneapolis authorities are refusing to tell us where that sex offender lives. Why are they protecting sex offenders? That's anybody's guess, but it's crazy. Meanwhile, the local police are being told by the mayor, don't help them. So if there are protests, and there are people trying to not just protest, but interfere with what ICE is doing, we don't have the support of local law enforcement to keep the peace. So when I talk about lowering the temperature, those are the two things that we want those local authorities to do. Help us find sex offenders and get them out of their community. And again, this is bonkers. Think about this. If you've got a neighbor who's a sex offender and somebody wants to go and take that person away, I'm going to raise my hand and say, yes, please, get that person away from my children. What is wrong with Minneapolis authorities? They so hate the idea of enforcing immigration laws that they're telling their people not to get sex offenders out of their community. It's crazy, and it's why we see so much chaos in Minneapolis, but not elsewhere.
Sean Hegarty, sir, 13 Action News here in Toledo. In the city itself, affordable housing is a real problem. Supply is low, rents are going up. What specifically can your administration do to increase the supply and get people, especially in the city of Toledo, into long-term, stable, good housing?
So we're working on a number of things on this front. First of all, one of the things the president just announced a couple of weeks ago that, again, hasn't gotten a lot of media attention, but I think is very important, is that he said, we want American homes to go to American citizens. That means no illegal aliens buying American homes. It means no mortgages going to people who have no legal right to be in this country. But it also means that we're going to stop large institutional investors from buying up American homes. That was a major announcement from the president, and we're working on that now. And you see this all the time. You see this massive, beautiful new subdivision where every single person there is renting because that subdivision was bought up by a massive institutional investor. That investor, by the way, is very often paying a lower price for their debt than an American citizen. So we give these people special rules, we give them cheaper access to money, and then we let them buy homes that by right go to American families. That is one of the main reasons why we believe homes have gotten unaffordable in this country. So again, the last administration did nothing about it. We're going to do something about it. We've already started. Here's another thing. If you look at the 20 biggest metros in the United States of America, the 14 with the most illegal aliens have seen the biggest decrease over the past year in rent prices. Now, why is that? Again, if you get people out of the country who are taking up homes that ought to go to American citizens, that's going to put downward pressure on prices. That's going to make it easier for young American families to afford to buy a home. There are 3 exceptions to that. 3 places where you've seen rents increase as opposed to decrease, and every single one of those places are sanctuary cities. So in addition to causing chaos, being a sanctuary city makes your communities less safe, and it also makes housing less affordable. It is very simple. Enforcing immigration law lowers prices for Americans and makes our communities safer. It's a no-brainer, so we'd encourage local authorities to continue to collaborate and work with us instead of fighting against us. Next question.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much. Kyle Mazza, freelancing for Honolulu Agency today. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky announced at today's summit for the World Economic Forum that Ukraine, Russia, and the U.S. will hold their first trilateral talks Friday and Saturday, the 23rd and 24th, in the United Arab Emirates. Seeing what your reaction is to that, about those talks, and in Minneapolis, sir, the attacks on law enforcement, the attacks on ICE, what is your message to the law enforcement community at this time when they look for the Trump and the Vance administration to calm their nerves, to ease their burdens? Families are reacting to this as well. So as you stand there on that stage today, how does that make you feel?
Well, one of the things that we want to do is send a message to our local law enforcement, to our federal law enforcement, that we stand with them. And we're not going to abandon them. We're not going to do what the last administration did, which is throw them under the bus to appease a bunch of left-wing radicals. We're actually going to fight for them. Because I believe, look, I continue to be fundamentally optimistic about our country. I think that whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, most people in this country fundamentally still support law enforcement. They love what people do to keep them safe. They recognize it's dangerous. But what happened in the Democratic Party over the last few years is they allowed a very small band of left-wing crazies to drive the agenda, and that makes our cops and our federal law enforcement feel less safe. It makes it feel like their government doesn't have their back. Well, I promise them, every single police officer in this country and every single federal law enforcement officer in this country, we have your back, and that's one of the messages I'm trying to send by going to Minneapolis and talking to our ICE officers there. So that's number one. Number two, you talk about attacks on law enforcement. It is insane. I understand, look, I'm biased, obviously. I think the Trump-Vance administration has got the right approach to immigration. I think it's insane to let tens of millions of people flood across your country, many of them with violent criminal records, and then to say you're not allowed to do anything to get those people out of your country. That's crazy to me. Fine. If you disagree, if you think that we ought to let sex offenders be in your community, even if they're illegal aliens, fine. Make that argument. But make that argument at the ballot box. Write an op-ed in a newspaper. Argue about it on social media. Don't go to the streets and start assaulting federal law enforcement officers because you disagree with the policies of our administration. It's cowardly bullshit, and it's got to stop. And here's the excuse my language to all the kids there. I'm sorry, got a little fired up. I was raised by a woman who cussed a lot, so sometimes I do too. My wife's on me. We're working on it. But here's the final point about this. People who assault federal law enforcement or local law enforcement will be shown no quarter. I just, probably 5 minutes before I got on stage, I got a message from our great Attorney General, Pam Bondi. You know what Pam said to me? That they finally arrested the ringleader of those church protests in Minneapolis. So here's the thing. Again, you don't have to agree with my immigration policies, but if you want to protest by going to an innocent church service on a Sunday, you see these images. They're scaring little kids who are there to worship God on a Sunday morning. Those people are going to be sent to prison so long as we have the power to do so. We're going to do everything that we can to enforce the law, whether you're protesting at a church, which is a violation of federal law, or you're assaulting a law enforcement officer, which again is a violation of federal law. There are going to be consequences. There already have been consequences, and there are going to be a lot more to come. So my message is, if you're thinking about assaulting a law enforcement, don't, because we're going to lock you up if you do. Now, you asked about Zelensky and Russia and Ukraine. Look, the president, he talks about this all the time. This has been the hardest war to solve. Of the 8 wars that the president has solved, he thought this would be the easiest. It's ended up being the hardest. The fact that they're sitting down and talking is progress. And I think we've made a lot of progress here. But look, you've got 2 people who really really hate each other. The President of the United States' attitude is quite simple, and I happen to think that it's exactly right. Peace is what is in the best interest of the United States of America. We want commerce between those two countries. We want Europe to be less focused on war and more focused on investing in the United States of America. And the best way to do that is to get that war to a peaceful resolution. We're going to keep on working on it. I've been disappointed in the past where I thought we were close to a peace deal, so I'm not going to predict that anything is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. But I know under the President's leadership, we've made great progress, and we're going to keep on making progress so we can stop the killing and get back to actually building things all over the world as opposed to people killing each other and tearing things down. I'll take one more question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. This is Mary Margaret Olahan with the Daily Wire. I know you were here in September in Minneapolis after an attack on a church that killed school children. What does it mean to you that this attack, another attack, happened on a church last weekend, and do you want to see more arrests for this attack?
So, Mary, yes, I certainly want to see more arrests because I've seen the videos and there are very clearly more people who have violated the law. Now, I'll let the Department of Justice speak to that because, as you know, actually getting an arrest warrant is not a walk in a park necessarily. There's a legal process that we have in this country, and rightfully so. But I know the Department of Justice continues to work on bringing every single person who is involved in that church protest. But it's not just a protest. When you interrupt people during a worship service, that is a violation of the law. Just as you have the right to protest, they have a right to worship God as they choose. And when you interrupt that, that is a violation of the law. So yes, I think we're going to see more prosecutions there. I certainly hope that we're going to see more prosecutions there, but I'll let the Department of Justice speak to the timeline there. And on that note, let me just say, I see a lot of people here. I see a few young people. I see a lot of people work at this great factory. I just want you to know that you are the people who make the United States of America a great country. When I think about all the great things about our nation, all the great things that we've accomplished, the world wars that we won, we've gone to the moon, we've cured diseases that nobody else thought could be cured. The foundation of that is the prosperity of the American working man and American working woman. You guys are the reason why we're able to do incredible things as the United States of America. We talk about our great foreign policy accomplishments. That starts right here in Toledo, Ohio. We talk about peace in the world. That starts right here in Toledo, Ohio. We talk about prosperity for the entire nation. That starts right here with building things and making things and employing good people in dignified work. That starts in Toledo, Ohio. The cars I see on the road all over the United States of America, many of them built right here. The steel that builds our bridges and so many of our great buildings happens a stone's throw away from this very facility. I want you to know that for too long, your leadership, your government, your politicians have looked down upon you, have ignored you, and that's not happening anymore. There's so many great things I could point to, so many policies, no taxes on tips, the regulatory reform, the fact that we unleashed American energy. But every single one of those specific policy wins is about a simple fact: reinvesting in you and ensuring that your family has the same great shot at the American dream that I had. This is very personal to me. I don't know if you saw the announcement. I guess we made it yesterday or the day before. But our wonderful second lady is pregnant with our fourth child, and I'm very, very happy about that. You know, we were debating having a fourth child, and I said, honey, you know, the new Trump accounts and the increased child tax credit are coming online, and we got to take advantage of this stuff. She's going to be pissed at me about that one. That's okay. But look, this is personal to me, just as I know it's personal to you. We've got skin in the game. Our great governor candidate, not governor yet, we're getting there. Our great senator, all of these great leaders, they love people in the state of Ohio. They love people in this community,